These jars are 2,000 years old, but they produce electricity. Batteries, as we know them, didn't exist until Alessandro Volta invented the first one in the year 1800. So, who invented this one first, and what for? This is one of archaeology's most electrifying mysteries, the Baghdad Battery. Our story begins not in antiquity, but in the late 1930s. In 1938, Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist and the director of the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, was rummaging through the museum's collections. He stumbled upon a peculiar set of artifacts that had been excavated from Kujat Rabu, a site near Baghdad. These objects he dated to the Parthian era, somewhere between 250 BC and 224 AD. At first glance, they just looked like simple clay jars, about 14 centimeters tall. But Koenig noted their bizarre construction. Inside each jar was a cylinder made of a rolled-up copper sheet. Suspended in the center of that copper cylinder, but not touching it, was an iron rod. The top was sealed with a plug of bitumen or asphalt, holding the iron rod and the copper cylinder perfectly in place. The iron rod showed signs of being corroded by an acidic substance. To Koenig, an archaeologist with a background in mechanics, this looked suspiciously like the basic components of a galvanic cell or a simple battery. He wondered, if you filled this jar with an acidic liquid, like grape juice or vinegar, both readily available back then, would it produce an electric current? But why? Why would an ancient civilization need a battery? King's famous theory, the one that put this artifact on the map, was electroplating, also known as gilding. It's a process where you use an electric current to deposit a thin layer of one metal, like gold or silver, onto the surface of another. Koenig theorized that ancient artisans might have used these batteries for just that. Now, a single Baghdad battery only produces about half a volt of electricity, a very weak current. But could they have used this low voltage to apply those beautiful, thin layers of gold onto silver objects? Modern experiments, including a famous test by the show Mythbusters, have proven that it's technically possible. They recreated the batteries, hooked several of them together in series to increase the voltage, and successfully plated a small token with another metal. It's a slow and somewhat inefficient process, but it works. The question isn't if it could be done, but if it was done. Supporters of the electroplating theory point to certain finely gilded artifacts from the period as potential proof. These pieces seem to have unusually thin and even layers of gold, which they argue would be difficult to achieve with other methods. But critics are quick to push back. They argue that a much simpler and more common technique called fire gilding or mercury gilding could explain these artifacts just as well. Fire gilding involves mixing gold with mercury to create an amalgam, applying it to the object, and then heating it to evaporate the toxic mercury, leaving a layer of gold behind. It was a known technique in the ancient world, and it doesn't require any mysterious batteries. Furthermore, many archaeologists point out that similar jars from the same region have been found with something entirely different inside. At the nearby ancient city of Seleucia, identical sealed jars were discovered containing what looked like the remnants of papyrus or parchment scrolls. This suggests a far more mundane, though still important, purpose. They were simply protective containers. The bitumen seal would have made them waterproof, protecting sacred or valuable documents from the elements. In this context, the inner copper cylinder might have just been a reinforcement or a frame to keep the scroll from collapsing. The iron rod, its purpose is less clear, but it could have been part of the storage mechanism. The acidic corrosion could simply be the result of decomposed organic matter from the scrolls over to millennia. If they weren't for electroplating or storing scrolls, what else could they be? The door is open to other theories. Some propose they had a medical use, perhaps a primitive form of electrotherapy. The ancient Greeks and Romans knew that electric fish, like the torpedo ray, could be used to numb pain. It's a stretch, but perhaps Parthian healers discovered a way to create their own mild electrical charge for similar therapeutic purposes. Another, more theatrical theory suggests a religious function. Imagine a priest in a temple, using several of these batteries connected together to create a small but surprising spark, or a faint tingling sensation for worshippers who touched a sacred object. It would have seemed like magic, a divine sign from the gods. The core mystery remains. On one hand, we have an object that, when assembled with an acidic electrolyte, functions as a battery. It's a design that seems to predate the accepted invention of the battery by Alessandro Volta by at least 1,800 years. If it was a battery, it represents a shocking leap in technological understanding, a forgotten branch on the tree of knowledge. Or was it all just an accidental design? A strange coincidence where the materials used for storing scrolls just happened to form a weak galvanic cell. A fascinating case of form mimicking function without intent. Without more evidence, like finding an ancient workshop with batteries connected to gilding equipment, or texts describing their use, the Baghdad Battery remains tantalizingly ambiguous. It's a Rorschach test for how we view the past. Do we see lost, high technology, or do we see simple, practical solutions that we are overinterpreting through a modern lens? For now, it sits in the museum, a silent testament to a potential lost spark of ancient ingenuity. What do you think? An ancient power source or a simple scroll jar? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring the mysteries of our past, be sure to subscribe to the Origin Pulse for our next journey into the unknown.